million people. Very small market. We definitely need to be integrated with the rest of the world. We have to break away from our mindset of somehow or other clustering ourselves and thinking we can do it on our own. I know I have so many friends in the business community, and I talk with them at a philosophical level. They do agree with me. But then when I get into the individual conversation, I also hear some come and tell me, but Iran, we have to somehow protect our industry. I want you to really think through that very carefully. Obviously, we want our businesses to succeed. We are doing all this to raise the living standards of our people and our country. But I'm saying, we've come this route for a long time. We need to look at it afresh. If we are going to integrate with the rest of the world, we want to open up and open our borders. So if I give you just one quick example, tourism has been a seasonal business. It's a seasonal business, November, December, January, February. Why? Because it started with attracting European and American tourists who came here for their winters. That we should leave behind. Asia is growing. Why can't we be a 365-day tourist destination? We have our traditional tourism. Our traditional tourism is to do with our ancient cities, our history, our beaches, the sun, wildlife. But what about urban tourism? What about making this the convention center? India is growing so fast. Right? Lots of things we are learning which we don't know. The middle class in India is equal to the whole of Europe. This is how the world has changed. 5 million tourists. When I was in office as State Minister of Finance, the highest number of tourists we had was about 2.3 million. Getting 5 million tourists, if we open our minds, is not a big issue. 2 million can come just from the Indian subcontinent and 3 million from rest where. We must break through this. These are low-hanging fruits. Will also help us with our foreign reserves issues. This is the kind of mindset change. Our foreign policy of the Samagijana Balavegya, we are an independent country, but we are a small island next to the Indian subcontinent. Our foreign policy will never threaten India's defense in any way, but our foreign policy is such that we will invite investment from any source if investment comes. We want to make sure that we have an open platform, a transparent platform, so that investors could come from anywhere and work with our businesses. That is our foreign policy. Economic diplomacy will take center stage in our foreign policy. That's what our diplomats should be doing. The Lakshman Kadaragama principle, 75% of diplomats will be professionals in the foreign service. Others who are going to be appointed have to also be professionals. No family member of any politician will be appointed into those foreign policy positions. No way. That's the change that's the change that we want to see happen in Sri Lanka. We need to change this. We need to change this. I know my introduction is a little long, but I want to say this. Because when people come and ask me, Iran, what's the biggest problem in this country? I never say it's the economy. This is so small, it can be put right. The biggest problem I say in this country is the rule of law. That is the biggest issue. If the rule of law is working and every citizen feels that they are equal, the law applies equally, that they have dignity, we can fix the economy. Even foreign investors, direct foreign investors in particular, will have confidence because they know that the law actually works. And this is something that we have to deeply think about. We have to establish the rule of law. We can't take it lightly at all. We have a situation in which, the president of the country has been accused by the Supreme Court of the country. I'm not making a political statement here. I'm just making a statement is that because I believe strongly in the rule of law and a just society, right? The Supreme Court of the country, the judicial system must be independent from the legislature. The legislature must be independent from the executive. All three arms of government must be independent of each other, check and balance on each other, and work perfectly. But the Supreme Court says that the president has violated the constitution of the country recently in two separate judgments. Sri Lankans' rule of law is the critical thing. Everybody, from the president to the man on the street, the rule of law must apply equally. Samage jana bala vegaya. We don't want to go the old route. We are going a new route. Some people look at us, and the other day Harsha and I were laughing at each other, and they feel like, you all have all been in power, and how can you say you're a new party and you're going on a new journey? And we were telling ourselves, Harsha and I have never served in a cabinet of this country. But people look at us and think that we have, and that we are senior politicians. And the reason I said that example is, it's a new road. It's a new journey. Samagi Janabali is new. We may have come from different political backgrounds and political parties and from different experiences, but we are going on a new road and a new way. We have been working on this over a period of time, right? We have 27 groups over a 2-year period. We worked on policy for all these 27 areas. It's not this. Go back to see. Okay, these are the 27 areas. Just to give you a very quick run. It's more than 600 pages. The policy document is more than 600 pages. We had professionals. Rajiv is sitting here. He coordinated this. We had professionals. We had academics, all working together over more than a 2-year period. It's they who basically came up with all these policy areas. That's why I said it's a long policy document. But a lot of work has been done. The manifesto is only a small reflection of the work that has been done. And then in terms of transparency, these are the things that we are intending to do. We have a law called the Seabok law, but we are going to strengthen it further because we want to see changes. I was glad that I was able to, a year ago, bring a private member's motion bill to Parliament saying all politicians and high officials should make public their asset declarations. In this election, there's a lot of talk about asset declarations that have started, and I was glad that the government accepted it, and that's working. We're going to create an independent public prosecutor's office. Presently, the government's lawyer is the Attorney General's department. There's clearly a conflict of interest because he's my lawyer one day, I rob and steal the next day, and he's supposed to put a case against me. It just does not happen. We've studied the model in Hong Kong. We've been there. I've been there a couple of times, looked at it very closely, and we want to create that. Once cases are put, presently the law is the sole discretion, even to withdraw a case, is with the Attorney General. That's a conflict of interest. We want to do away with it. We want to make sure that it's independent and people will be prosecuted and held responsible. Public procurement is another huge area in transparency. You know that you may have been a victim of that. Public procurement. No transparency. We want to create a public procurement platform and make sure that e-procurement is moved, all public procurement. We want to make sure that transactions will be publicized and also information will be made available. A public procurement law will be passed with global best practices to ensure that all public procurement will be covered by the new law. Then the other thing we will do in tackling corruption is bringing a law for stolen assets recovery. This law is already drafted. Like I said about the assets and liabilities, making it public that there was a private member's law. We have presented a private member's law already in Parliament on stolen assets recovery. So if there is obviously a change of government and we are in office, then it becomes a part of our government law. We will bring it in. We want to trace, seize, and confiscate these assets. A parliamentary budget office has been approved by Parliament, but it's still to be set up properly, and it will be set up soon. The idea of the Parliamentary Budget Office is manifold. Everything that is presented in Parliament by government, even the budget, is independently analyzed there. In some countries, the Parliamentary Budget Office has gone even further. In an election, when you present your manifesto, they look at the manifesto and say, can this be done? What is the feasibility? Or it can't be done. In advanced countries, it's got to the point that people don't believe your manifesto. They actually believe the report that's coming from the Parliamentary Budget Office. It will take a time to actually set it up, and when it is being set up, and I have said this to the Speaker of the present House, when we are setting this up, I said we need private sector people involved in it. Because the skill sets are different, particularly in budget management, which to a large extent lacks in the public sector. Not because public officials are foolish, but public officials are often dealing with expenditure. They are not dealing with revenue and expenditure. Only a few arms deal with revenue, all are dealing with expenditure. So when we are setting it up, we need private sector participation and private sector skills in actually doing it. Then we have a central revenue authority which we want to create. Most of the country's revenue comes from three institutions: inland revenue, customs, and excise. If you have dealt with them, I don't need to tell you more. I worked with all of them for 2.5 years. Nobody accused me or my minister that we took $1. But the level of corruption in these institutions, businessmen continued to come and complain about. My point is this: let's get out of the mindset that we are going to look at individuals. We need systems change, and we need to put systems in place. It doesn't matter who sits on the chair today, but we need a systems change. That's what we need. And to have the systems change, we need to change that. A good leader is measured not when he's in office, but once he has left office. If the good things he has put in place continue, then we all know we've had a great leader. That is why we are after systems change. So, these central revenue collection authorities, let's say you have to import, you go to the bank, you open your LC, it comes, you now go to customs, you go to clear it, and then they look at the HS code, and then discussions happen. This is what most businessmen come and say. What are we doing here? We are going to remove the interaction. We want to get rid of the interaction, remove the interaction. The message goes, once the goods have arrived into the central authority tells the customer, you pay there, message goes there, goods are cleared. I'm giving you one quick example. This is not, something amazing. Countries have actually done this. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to keep implementing it. So this is the direction that we are going to go in creating a central revenue authority. Then the public sector. We want to basically digitize this. We started this in 2003-04. We created the East Sri Lanka program. The pillars were information infrastructure, regenerating government, ICT policy, leadership development, local language initiative, monitoring, and so forth. The three components the DPI should have here is everybody will have a unique identification number. That's something that we are going to move into. The ability to transfer value, interoperability will have to be a part of that system. And then, of course, very conscious about privacy. We'll maintain privacy and we will not do things without the consent of the individual. Many benefits, as you can see, in moving there. And finally, I would like to talk about the public sector management itself, because this is another key issue that many people keep talking about. We know that we had 700,000 public servants. In a 20-year period, it has doubled. And therefore, numbers is one issue, and how do we deal with the numbers? Obviously, we have to deal with it over time. We can't create more social instability. Recognition of the problem, and then how do you actually deal with the problem? We have ideas how we will do it. I don't blame a single public servant for the mess that is in the public service. It is politicians who are responsible because they recruited people for political gain and ruined Sri Lanka's public service. So public servants are not to blame with. So when we deal with it, we have to deal with the issue in a very fair manner. And then there are overlapping roles here, right? There's redundancy, underpayment, right? The best brains go there, but they leave after a while. So there's numbers issue, political interference, and so forth. So we have to deal with it. One of the things we are going to do, start at the top. And we have now said this publicly and put it in our manifesto. We are going to restrict the cabinet of the country. In the constitution, there's a little loophole that politicians have slipped in. If you form a national government, you can have any amount of ministers. Sajith Premadasa has decided to do away with that clause in the cabinet. Just completely do away with it, so that you can't be expanding ministers as you want, looking at faces and deciding whether to include them. He has given that commitment. If we set the example at the top and look at rationalizing, I think then we can change the public sector also, because we are changing it at the top. So we are going to look at that. So we restrict the cabinet ministers, independent public service. It's a long-term goal because independence was locked with the Republican Constitution. We will certainly look at that. We will strengthen the regulatory bodies, and we look at consumer protection as well, and then planning and plan implementation will be bought. I would like to just expand on that point. Presently, how the system works is this. I'm the president of the country, and I'm thinking that I want an airport, I want a highway to my city or whatever. I take a cabinet paper, go to the cabinet, I get it approved, and then they start on the work, and the Ministry of Finance has to go and negotiate and get the resources. This is how it actually works. Lots of capital expenditure projects in this country have had no project evaluation. No project evaluation. I remember I was deputy minister, with Kabir Hashim was the minister, and Kabir and I was objecting to the building of a particular highway. You know what happened? I was sidelined, and Kabir was sidelined. I was invited only when the foundation stone was being laid. That's how Sri Lanka works. I was very clear that that highway shouldn't have been built because there is no return. This country is in this situation because we undertook projects without proper project evaluation. That is why we are bringing a Ministry of Planning and Plan Implementation. Capital expenditures will be decided only after they are independently vetted and approved by professionals. It's only then that it will be sent to the cabinet. I think we need to stop this nonsense that has gone on for too long. This is why I'm saying we are on a new path and a new road. Just because it's somebody's project, building a highway, building a port, building an airport. When I went to object to it once, I got threatened when I went to object to it. Man came with a pistol in his hand, a gun in his hand, and we escaped that day. Ajit Pereira, the former MP, is here, the attorney at law. Ajit was with me when that incident actually happened. We need to get out of that. Capital expenditures, plan and plan implementation is absolutely important. We've recognized it, and we are going to institute it. KPIs are needed in the public sector. We are going to hire mid-career professionals We can't change it only by having people coming. We need to have people sitting in this audience in the system. Because if your skill sets are not in the system, you play an important role in the private sector. We really appreciate it. You play an important role in civil society. But some of you and some of your skills are needed within the system. I took a personal decision to give up my career and go into this. Because one day, I was advising a minister. I was head of the bank, advising him. He looked at me and he said to me, Iran, you haven't understood something. I said, what haven't I understood? He said, you haven't understood that the system works for those in it. That's the day I went home and my mind opened. I head of the bank, I go in the evening to cocktail parties. I know everything that's wrong. I discuss everything that's wrong. But he opened my mind and he said, unless some of you are in the system, it's going to be very difficult to bring change. So we need to allow mid-career professionals to come into this. We must invest heavily in training, which we don't. And then I won't go into the other details. I'm going to conclude there. For state-owned enterprises, we are going for the Temasek model. In state-owned enterprises, some work was done in the earlier period. The present government has done a lot of work. We are going to continue. We are not going to start afresh. We are going to just take it forward, and we will look at the things that we can absorb and any changes that are needed. And the idea, the important thing there is management of the public sector companies. Some could completely be closed down. Some could be moved to the private sector. Some could be joint public-private partnerships. But a very important thing is when you create the model, I use the word Temasek or Kazana, when you use the model, one important thing is the minister does not decide on the appointment of the directors. We have to get out of that model. That model has gone on for too long. I go in there, several institutions are brought under me, and I decide and put it. That's why you hear that friends and relations are being put. When we get into the Temasek model, we get out of that. We only appoint the Temasek board, and after that, the professionals just take over. They work to bring a return. And who are the shareholders? The citizens of the country. That is why we want to go that route. And I repeat again, whatever progressive things that the present government has done, we are not going to reinvent the wheel. We're just going to take it forward from there. Thank you again for your patient listening.
Thank you very much, Honorable Iran Vikmaratne, for those valued words on this momentous occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we all put our hands together one more time as a very clear vision is being read out here at A Vision for the Future. In the meantime, just as we prepare to hear from our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to make an apology to our dear guests who have just made their entry, as we could see crowds gathering in at the foyer as well as behind the hall. So please make a note that the team is making every effort as possible to have you all seated and comfortable. Once again, apologies for any inconvenience caused. But with that, as we move forward here, as we spread out a vision for the future, our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce him to you. A member of Parliament representing the Colombo district and currently serves as the chairman of the Committee on Public Finance. His political career includes previous roles as the non-cabinet Minister of Economic Reform and Public Distribution and as the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. He began his professional journey as a chief economist and a treasurer at DFCC Bank, holding a PhD in economics from the University of Missouri. Ladies and gentlemen, later he co-founded Nielsen Lanka, which became one of Sri Lanka's leading market research firms. After exiting the company, he worked as an international consultant, contributing to projects across more than a dozen countries with organizations such as the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, also known as the ADB, and UNDP. He's also the visionary behind the 1990s SOAS area, Sri Lanka's state-of-the-art ambulance service, recognized by the World Bank in 2024 as one of the most technologically advanced and efficient in the world. Additionally, he's a global Eisenhower Fellow. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together in welcoming Dr. Harsha De Silva.
Good evening. Eran, you did a superb job making the introduction. And I'll sort of take from where he left off, because ours is a team. We work together. We think, we sit, we discuss, we debate, and then Sajith will put a spanner in the works. And then we discuss again, and we arrive at some conclusion. Once we arrive at a conclusion, we will implement those. So first of all, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be a part of this great team to launch an updated version of the SJB blueprint. Our blueprint was first launched in 2022 when the crisis happened. We said, look, these are the things we think need to be done. Then in 2023, February, we launched the updated version of the Blueprint 2.0. Subsequently, we worked on it for a year, and now hopefully, if you support us, we will form a government. And then what this updated blueprint talks about is that vision for our country. It's not just a plan, it's a promise. A promise to rebuild Sri Lanka. A promise to chart a path towards resilience, innovation, and inclusive development. A promise to ensure that segments of society, all segments, benefit from our recovery and future growth. Our promise is based on our ideology, what Eran touched upon, a social market economy. What is this? It's a synthesis of economic freedom. That means we believe in markets, and of economic justice. We believe in inclusivity and equity. That's really where Sajith plays a huge role. He understands the suffering of the people. He tells us always, Harsha, Eran, Kabir, all your theories are fine, but at the end of the day, we got to make sure the person, the man, woman, and the children in the household feel the change. So that's what we believe in. In other words, we want to create an economy that not only grows, but grows for everyone. When you read our blueprint, you will realize that we are not just about numbers and policies, but about people. It's about people. It's about empowering every Sri Lankan to contribute and benefit from development. Given the time I have, Sajith is on the way, I will break my presentation into 4 pillars, 10 points. Governance, stabilization, growth, and equity. And I will conclude thereafter. The broad area of stabilization deals with managing the debt crisis, monetary and exchange rate policy, revenue consolidation, and expenditure consolidation. But before that, I'll start with the debt restructure because there's so much discussion on the debt restructure. And of course, the related agreement with the IMF. Maybe some of you know that bondholders steering committee filed an amicus brief in the New York District Court last week to push the government to launch the restructure by the 15th of September. That's just 10 days away. This goes to show the complexity of the transaction. We got the official creditor committee agreement reached, but not signed. It has a bunch of clawback clauses. B, the bondholders' proposal, we are told, the government has agreed to after negotiation, and that there is a 28% nominal haircut, but in 2028, when it really happens, depending on our progress measured in terms of US dollar GDP, the haircut could fall to, by all accounts, to 15%. Now the IMF has to agree that the two agreements are within the accepted debt sustainability analysis, or the DSA. And furthermore, the OCC, that is the Official Creditor Committee, must agree that the bondholders' agreement is within the comparability of treatment. Thus far, multiple stay orders have been obtained in that district court, so a decision on the case, a determination, could be held back until such time the government reaches agreement with the creditors. So these are friendly interventions to give the government time to agree. Now, these are all based on the DSA, which has been agreed between the government and the IMF, which then leads to the negotiations with the creditors. Now, some say this is outdated. This was agreed upon in 2022, but that's not really the case. Every time the staff level agreement is signed, you update it. But those updates thus far have not made any significant changes to the parameters of debt to GDP, of the gross finance limits, the amount of foreign debt that we could go into year on year, and the gap that need to be closed by the restructure. So when yesterday I heard, or rather I read in the night, our competitors' economic plan, and in fact the leader of the party spoke to many of you perhaps who would have been there yesterday, said, look, we can change the DSA because the Chamber of Commerce says that Sri Lanka's GDP growth might be 6.5% as opposed to 3.1% that the IMF has forecasted. Well, if the IMF is going to agree to the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce assessment that we will create 6.5% GDP, so be it. But let me tell you, that's not going to happen. So to mess around with the base document on which our entire program is structured on is a dangerous thing. And it's an irresponsible thing. What if during the course of the so-called renegotiation based on an alternate DSA, the Hamilton Reserve Bank verdict comes through? Then what will happen? Perhaps there are some bondholders here as well. And speaking to people who are representing the bondholders, White and Case and Rothschild, they think, why would others not also sue? Think about the danger of trying to create a different foundation for the restructuring that we are. Can you sort of, there's an echo. Can you reduce that echo, please? Restructure, that's continuing. Now so I think you are very clear that when we say that there are certain limits within which we can negotiate this agreement with the IMF, there are limits within which we can negotiate and renegotiate with the creditors. It is not as if we can say, we will pay it when we can, and they will say, okay, no problem. That's not how the world works. Right? So let us be very, very careful in not being fooled by certain people who say that they can change the whole thing. Now let me get to the monetary and exchange rate policies. We are fully supportive of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka Act. They need independence. We did not oppose the Central Bank Act, and they will have the independence to manage inflation. That's their basic job. And we will agree, currently it's 5%, depending on what the environment is, it may be up or down, but once we agree, they will have to deliver. There is no room for politicians to interfere in setting interest rates. And let us be very clear. The moment you try to do that, what happens is fiscal dominance of monetary policy. Like Iran said, somebody wants to set up some building somewhere, there is no money, you will tell the central bank, give me the money, print the money. Last time we did that, we learned a terrible, terrible lesson. And they are going to be accountable to Parliament. Yesterday, some of you were there, and our political opponents flip-flopped on it. They said, yes, we support independence. But they said, ජනවරම ඉලක්ක සාක්ෂාත් කර ගැනීම සඳහා මහ බැංකුව ක්‍රියාත්මක විය යුතුයි. ඒ ජනවරමෙන් ලැබෙන ඉලක්ක සාක්ෂාත් කරන්න මහ බැංකුව ක්‍රියා කරන්න ඕනේ නම්, in the document it says they proposed policy interest rates for economic growth, which is completely contradictory. On the one hand, you can't tell the central bank, you manage inflation and you manage the currency. And on the other hand, you cannot say, well, this is the interest rate I want you to have so that I can encourage growth. So be mindful of what you hear and see whether these are actually practical or some people are just saying things to please certain segments of society. On exchange rates must be market equilibrium. But to manage the volatility, there has to be some sort of intervention in the short term. The objective is to maintain an internationally competitive real exchange rate. A lot of people don't understand this. It is not the nominal exchange rate we need for international competitiveness. It is a real exchange rate. What it means is that the exchange rate will have to adjust for differences in price levels among either competitors or trading partners. So you can depreciate the interest rate, but if that depreciation is completely taken over by inflation, what happens is you're back to square one. So if you have an independent central bank, and if you are going to keep them to meet those targets, then we can have a low inflation regime and a stable and a competitive exchange rate. Next area of focus in stabilization is revenue consolidation and expenditure control. On the revenue side, Iran mentioned earlier, the average revenue to GDP of emerging markets is 26%. Ours, he said, between 89 and 91 was the highest ever, and that was 23.3%. Then it declined. From 2004 to 2014, it declined to 11.2%. And with what Mangala did, late Mangala, our departed friend, we miss him all. We all miss him rather. Brought it up to about 12.5%. But with what Gotabaya Rajapaksa did, it fell back to 8.4%. And that year, we were the lowest, absolutely the lowest revenue to GDP in the world. It's absolutely essential that we increase revenue. Now people ask us, is 15.4% the agreement with the IMF? Is that feasible? We think it is feasible. By 2027 to 2029, we should meet 15.4% GDP, revenue to GDP. We are okay with that. But the issue is, how do we get it? Is it purely by increasing all kinds of taxes, or is it expanding the net and improving compliance? We are one of the worst in compliance. We should actually think about it ourselves, our own compliance. Do we comply? Right? So, the overarching plan to increase revenue and to increase compliance is digitalization. We will, as one of the first things we do, start implementing what we call the DPI, the digital public infrastructure, right? And that will be for transactions across the economy. Our plan is to establish, like Iran said, a unified revenue authority, incorporating the Inland Revenue Service, customs and excise. The IMF diagnostic study spells out the pervasive nature of corruption. It's embarrassing. They say at the highest levels, it's printed and distributed around the world that the IRS is corrupt, that the customs is corrupt, that excise is corrupt. So then, beyond digitalization, we have to make sure the rent-seeking behavior of those people has to be eliminated. Right? So unless you are able and willing to do that, unless you have the political will to implement that, corruption in these agencies will also continue. Now at the same time, those who pay are squeezed. I have a friend of mine who is a very big taxpayer. He pays every cent that he has to pay. He complains every Friday night. Harsha, what the hell? I pay so much. Can't you reduce my taxes? And I say, Majang, get your friends also to pay? It's really unfair. Pay guys have no escape, right? A recent UNDP study this year shows that most people are not registered for taxes. Most people don't have TIN numbers. Yet they believe that you can't do that. And we say we can. We're not going to muck around with the targets that we have agreed upon. We will not change the tax-free threshold, but people have to pay some tax for their education, for their security, for their health. So we have devised a way beyond the first 100,000 tax-free limit up to about ₹500,000 a month. The marginal tax rate will go from 1% to 24%. Beyond that, you will get back onto the existing marginal tax brackets going up to 36%. The corporate income tax, for the moment, will stay. But we think that we need to incentivize the tradable sector, the exporters. So whenever we can, and there is going to be debate about this because some people say profit is profit, so therefore everybody has to pay the same tax, but we think otherwise. And therefore, we will, the soonest possible, provide an incentive in corporate income tax for exporters. VAT will remain at 18. We would like to bring it down to 15 for selected items, at least at the beginning, and make it zero rated for certain essential items. For instance, even high protein food for infants today get taxed at 18%. And if you understand the suffering of the people, you would wonder, is this the right thing to do? When 7 million people are in poverty, malnutrition is unbelievably high, wasting, stunting. There are issues. So therefore, we will consider those. And for the exporters, I would like to emphasize that SVAT will remain until such time there's a better way to deal with it. But we have to pay for all this. We can't give things free. So our thinking is the withholding tax will have to be relooked at. Now, withholding tax, people will say it's only a cash flow item. Sure, it's cash flow. But if compliance is so low, we can collect 10% as opposed to 5% from those who are evading and those who are under-reporting. So therefore, we will have to seriously look at raising revenue through this measure. Then there is another issue with excise tax. Excise tax is actually ad valorem. Specie tax. What we need to do is to index excise tax to some formula that reflects the taxes paid as prices increase. Then look at the casinos. The gross gaming revenue is only taxed at 15%. And there is online revenue in these casinos that gets taxed at 0. No tax. Nobody's paying. Is that fair? So we need to look at how to increase revenue from these measures. And I'm telling you, as a chairman of the Committee on Public Finance, I have been at the government for the last 1.5 years to set up a gambling regulator. Casinos are everywhere with no regulation. There's no way to actually find out what their profits are. You think we can really figure out what the profit of a casino is? Right? So there are these issues that we'll have to deal with. We will also sign up with OECD BEPS Digital Economic Framework, and we're also thinking of applying the minimum global alternate tax of 15% on multinationals. Because we have to find ways to pay for this. We're not going to just say we will do this, do that, and do the other thing unless we have revenue. Finally, in stabilization is expenditure control. We must rationalize public expenditure, and we have to better target our spending. And in the future, if we form a government, all subsidies will be cash transfers. There is no need to give subsidies to everyone. But people who need subsidies will need to be targeted properly and transferred cash. But our blueprint also calls for revision of public sector salaries. Now, we were very responsible. We read the report of the expert committee appointed by the president, and the expert committee said, you have to increase public sector salaries by 24%. And also increase the cost of living allowance from 17,800 to 25,000. That's what we said. Now the president went ahead and did it, and he went on a political stage and told us to remove those promises from our manifesto. We're not going to remove those from our manifesto. We've been very responsible. It's not some figure from the air we put. It is a number that was provided by the expert panel and approved by the Treasury. Then also there's going to be some other benefits, particularly on maternity leave benefits. It's not going to cost a whole lot of money, but you know that 80% of unemployed women are between the ages of 20 and 40. And there is enough evidence to suggest that we can use this money to improve the labor force participation of women. Now on SOE reforms, I'm not going to go in there because Iran talked about it. Next is the key pillar of growth from stabilization. Yesterday, the JVP said in the economic policy document, 1977 was the beginning of the end. All regimes up to now destroyed the economy. Trend was exacerbated after 77 due to unplanned and unwise economic policies. Our view is quite the opposite. Many advances took place over the years. We are not a total basket case, thanks to early reforms. But those who oppose the reforms, those who brought in protectionist and interventionist policies, those who violently stopped this nation's progress, are the ones who destroyed our economy, in our view. Then since 2009, things got worse with severe interventions in markets, all kinds of import surcharges, politicized investment approvals, massive white elephant projects funded by domestic borrowing, money printing, etc. All this led to an anti-tradable bias in our economy, a bias against exports. Do you know exports fell from 30% in the early 2000s to just 15% now? Just look at this chart. The green line shows the Sri Lankan share in developing country exports. In 1977, we had something like 0.03. Then it went up to about 0.3%, and it fell now 50%. When the developing country exports 50% to the world, we are falling. There's something wrong in our economy. And that is the serious issue that we need to resolve. We have hit the bottom. So there's massive upside if we have the right policies. ඊයේ JVP කට්ටිය කිව්වා ලක්ෂ 38ක දෛනික වෙළඳපොළ කුඩා නිසා ඉන් එහාට යන්න වුන් තානාපති කාර්යාල හරහා ජාත්‍යන්තර වෙළඳපොළ හොයලා දෙන්නම් කියලා. But ours is not such marginal efforts of promises of non-events. We want to fundamentally reorient our economy to one that is globally connected, with private enterprise driving growth. To do this, we need to do two things. One is trade and FDI liberalization. Two, unshackled domestic markets, including product and labor markets. What we must aim to do is to create productivity growth from our current low, or let me tell you, even negative productivity growth in the recent past. I will quickly list out some key policies that we plan to implement. On trade and FDI policy, replace quantitative restrictions with tariff and over time reduce towards a uniform low tariff regime. Give maximum backing for export-oriented FDI. We will see a new incentive structure that is rationalized for exporters based on the national export strategy, maximize the benefits of existing FTAs, utilize mutual recognition agreements, finally establish a national single window. Everyone is talking about a national single window. We have been trying to do this for years, but it is not getting done. Why? Not because we don't have the technology. It is because of certain people not wanting to let it happen. But when we embark on this path, it is critical we implement trade adjustment packages to mitigate the negatives of some existing players. Because people will complain, look, we are losing out because you are opening out. So we can't do one without doing the other. We will certainly legislate anti-dumping regulations to protect our industries from unfair foreign competition. A key feature of our plan is to upgrade and expand industrial parks and EPZs. Like Iran said, if something good has happened, we will continue it. We have no problem with the new law that is going to let private enterprise create zones. In fact, our competitors have many, many more EPZs than us. Since 1978, Katunayaka, we've opened only 15 EPZs. But take, for example, in the Philippines, 92%, in Vietnam, 89%, and in India, 74% of export processing zones are private. But we have only one. That is MS Fabric Park. Sajith is really wanting to see whether you will help this country by setting up EPCs and factories, not just in one or two places in the country, but across the island. Once we set the international trade and investment policy, then you can boost productivity, boost production of goods and services that you're experts at. Again, yesterday I heard our competitors say they will tell you how many five-star hotel rooms to build. They will tell you how many chefs to hire. That they will analyze the data and tell you where to invest. Also, instead of 2 out of 50 entrepreneurs succeeding, they will ensure all 50 do. That is pie in the sky. No political politburo can do that. This is a failed model. No one is better able to tell you what to do than you yourself. You are successful because you know how to do it. I don't think we are going to fall for such stories. From the very people who stifled your ability to grow and until yesterday opposed reform. So our plan is to create a conducive platform tilted towards globally integrated agriculture, manufacturing, and services. A few examples. We need to promote the creation of agriculture information platforms that allow transactions via the digital public infrastructure. For farmers to know what buyers want, to enter into forward sales agreements, to banks to provide working capital on these forward sales agreements, for insurance to be purchased. But this is beyond the regular efforts of helping the farmer with his seeds, fertilizer, irrigation, etc. We need to promote the establishment of nationwide network of climate control agri-warehouses. These will be located in areas where farmers grow produce. Valimada for potatoes, Matale for onions, Jaffna for chilies, and so on. Do you know that we don't have a single, not one, not a single climate control warehouse for the millions of farmers out there? Right? And there are people who are agriculture ministers who are running for president. All these will be e-network facilities for dehydration, etc. We will provide incentives for net houses, for greenhouses, for drip irrigation and things like that. Our aim is twofold. One is to help farmers increase their incomes, and two, to bring down cost of living. In industry, our focus is to facilitate our entrepreneurs to connect with the global value chains. Those who even oppose apparels are now attempting to erase the past. But we want to create an attractive environment for global manufacturing, be it in apparels, be it electronics, or advanced technology. Some specifics. Taxes are not what principally drives investment decisions. But given the competitive nature of FDI attraction, we will provide time-bound and specific incentives. We have already announced up to 300% advanced capital allowance. A key measure we wish to implement, this you might find a little odd, is to remove the minimum 30% value-added requirement for re-export. Now, why do I say that? Because the world is moving to fractional value addition, away from such obsolete practices. If we are to join global manufacturing value chains, we need to get volume. To think in the old paradigm will leave us behind with those who advocate Politburo directives. We will set up dedicated India and China desks at the Economic Commission to incorporate us into their production networks. There is no time to talk about projected growth in the 5 southern states of India, but it would be unwise for us not to leverage this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We will redouble our efforts to promote the Port City Special Economic Zone. Besides Homagama, Port City has the ability to become a regional technology center. Another key element is to promote R&D. We think the Slim Tech model is working, and we have already said 200% advanced capital allowance for R&D. We will push and accede to the Madrid Protocol for IP rights to help innovation and global patenting. And finally, on services. Given the time, note that our focus will be on tourism, on logistics, on IT and e-commerce. We are fully aware of the requirement in the service sector, rather the globally connected service sector. Suffice it to say, we will walk our talk. Be it in agriculture, industry and services, it's not just the big guys, but it is the micro, small and medium folk who need lots of support. I see some of them right here who've been fighting for the SMEs, MSMEs for so long. We have detailed in our blueprint document all what we are planning to do for MSMEs. From the issue of the end date on the parate of 15th of December, to business revival units, to insolvency laws for MSMEs, etc. We will fix it. Beyond MSMEs is how we will fire the startup revolution. In our ideology, entrepreneurship is front and center. Our objective is to help our people create wealth, as opposed to our competition who perhaps may tolerate some wealth. Our focus will be on talent, identification and building talent, and on funding. I will not spend time now on public sector management, on energy and utilities reform, and factor market reform. Iran touched on it comprehensively. But just to say that our focus is on digitization and the elimination, like I said at the beginning, the rent-seeking behavior in the public sector. The proposed DPI, the digital public infrastructure, will be the foundation. We will roll out the DPI project in stages by digitally transforming the records at the Register of Persons and start implementation at the Welfare Benefits Board. Our policy on energy and utilities reform shall be based on efficient and transparent energy markets based on cost-based tariffs with major focus on renewable energy. Our factor market reform agenda is detailed in our blueprint. Our plan for capital markets is based on strengthening the domestic capital market. We dealt with it at length at the Capital Markets Forum. But to sum up, how we will leverage long-term funding from EPF and insurance pools to create a long-term domestic debt market for industry. This is beyond saying we will create another development bank. I also worked in a development bank. Iran ran a development bank. Just the word development bank means nothing. If you don't have access to long-term funding, you cannot give long-term loans. So you got to really think about what you're saying when you say we set up a development bank. What you need is to link people who have long-term funding surplus with those with long-term funding deficits. Last, but the most important, or one of the most important issues, is strong social safety nets. Like Iran said, poverty has increased from 3 million to 7 million. Only 5% of national income goes to the bottom 20%. 1% sitting here enjoy 15% of national income, while the top 20% enjoy 51%. To maintain social stability that Iran talked about, to undertake social stability, to undertake reform, we must address this perennial issue. I'm going to stop. We have thought of 3 main items to focus on this. I will not go into details, but the first one is a new poverty alleviation program akin to Janasavya, where people are not just going to get doled out cash, but they will have to work for it. They will have to train for it. They will have to be able to find a job with the money that you get, so that within 24 months, you will have to have a plan to graduate from poverty. It's not going to be forever doling out money. And Sajith wants it to be woman-centered, centered on the woman in the household, be it the mother, be the wife, be the daughter, because we find out that they are more responsible than men, I'm sorry to say. But until such time, we will enhance the Aswasuma program because people need to survive. The second one will be economic justice in subsidies. Like I said, we don't believe in everyone getting subsidies. Most of you here don't need to be subsidized when you go to the petrol shed. But there are many others outside this hall who may need that. So therefore, targeted subsidies using the DPI to provide necessary subsidies for those who require. We will almost immediately upon taking office use the DPI for cash transfers, for fuel subsidies for selected people. Finally, the third point is something that is critically important, is aging and associated pension reform. Old age dependency, that is share of elderly over the share of working people, was 5% when we got independence. Today it is close to 20%. By 2050 it is going to be over 50%. And a lot of old people don't have a way of meeting ends meet. They can't pay for their health care. So therefore, we will certainly consider reforms in that. So from what I explained, I hope it is clear to you. We have thought about the enormity of the problem we face and proposed to you a plan, a promise to deal with the challenge facing us all. So to summarize, we will continue with the path of recovery, acknowledging the positives, yet change to ensure the recovery does not come at the expense of people's survival. We will incentivize tradable export growth into the long term to permanently lift Sri Lanka out of the cycles of this crisis by generating high growth. We will undertake reforms to sustain the change we create and unshackle markets and use digitalization to its max to increase efficiencies and productivity across the economy. And at the end, what we will do is to bring on a win for all Sri Lankans. All this is easier said than done. The road will not be easy, but worth traveling. Together, we can turn this vision into reality. We can build a Sri Lanka that our children will be proud to inherit. Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we further delve and dive into the SGB's Blueprint 3.0, I think it's very fitting for us to once again put our hands together to Dr. Harsha De Silva, ladies and gentlemen, for those words and, of course, taking us through a very detailed presentation. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to once again acknowledge your presence and thank you very much for joining with us. And as we move forward in today's agenda of course, further understanding and a vision for the future, it's time for me to introduce our next esteemed speaker, ladies and gentlemen, an economist holding a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Peradeniya and a master's degree in economics from the University of Colombo. His expertise has been further honed through his work as an international consultant on various projects and programs across several countries, including the USA, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Laos, the Philippines, and Vietnam. He has worked as a consultant to several major international organizations such as the United Nations Development Programme, UN Women, the United Nations Population Fund, the World Bank, USAID, and the Asian Development Bank. He is currently the chair of the Global Parliamentary Forum for Evaluation. In addition to his professional and academic pursuit, he has been a member of Parliament since 1994, representing the Kegaul district. Over the years, he has held several key ministerial positions, including the Minister of Higher Education and Vocational Training, Minister of Highways, Higher Education, Science and Technology and Investment Promotion, Minister of Public Enterprise Development, and Minister of Highways, Petroleum and Petroleum Resource Development. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause to Honorable Kabir Hashim.
The first thing that came to my mind was that my friend Harsha De Silva doesn't need to go for a jog in the morning because he's walked more than 1 kilometer on the stage, I think. So he's lucky. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and my incredibly thorough colleagues who have left me with the unenviable task of speaking last. For me, I seem to have drawn the short straw because all the substance has been covered by my incredible, esteemed colleagues. What's actually left for me is to try to make sure you don't fall asleep, because you've been sitting here for quite a while. And I'm going to try, because they've talked policy, they've talked numbers, they've talked strategy, and here I am left to do what politicians are usually good at, talk shop, which I'm good at too. But seriously, it's not just about an economic policy. As Harsha said, it's not only even about promises, it's about a pact between us and the people of this country, of the citizens of this country. It's about a pact with the farmers, the entrepreneurs, the youth, all our people of this country. It's so important. We reject the notion that growth and equity are mutually exclusive. If you notice our presentation, our vision is inclusive growth, where the rising tide will carry all boats, including the small boats, not only the big yachts of the few. It came to my mind that Christine Lagarde, who was the managing director of the IMF, one of the best managing directors, when she was retiring around 2015, in her speech, she spoke about many countries where economic growth has failed to lift the small boats. And in many cases, the poor and middle-class households had felt that their hard work and determination alone was not enough. And they also felt that many were convinced that the system was rigged and the odds were stacked against them. Her message was, at that time, to reduce excessive inequality. How relevant it has become in the world today. Yes, we will be bold, but we will also be responsible. We are not afraid of hard choices in the SJB because we know the stakes, because the stakes are high. You know, I remembered something today which I thought I'll take the chance and tell you all this. I remembered a story. I found this piece of paper when I was rummaging through my drawer. This is a piece of paper I wrote when I was 16 years old as a student about socialism, communism, and capitalism. And I just took it up and I rewrote the little thing because I wanted to tell you this story because it gives us a strong message. The story is about the modern little red hen. Once upon a time, there was this little red hen which lived in a farm, and it was scratching around in the barnyard when it found some grains of wheat. And it called out to the neighbors and said, "If we plant this wheat, we will have bread to eat. Who will help me plant it?" "Not I," said the cow. "Not I," said the pig. And "not I," said the duck. And "not I," said the goose. "Then I will," said the little red hen, and she planted the grains of wheat. This wheat grew and opened into golden grain. Now again she asked, the little red hen asked, "Who will help me reap my grain?" "Not I," said the duck. "Not in my classification," said the pig. "I'll lose my seniority," said the cow. "And I'll lose my unemployment compensation," said the goose. "Then I will," said the little red hen, and she reaped the grain. At last it was time to bake the bread. And she asked again, "Who will help me bake the bread?" And everybody, as usual, "That will be overtime for me," said the cow. "I'll lose my welfare benefits," said the duck. "I am a dropout and I have never learned," said the pig. "Well, if I am to be the only helper, that is discrimination," said the goose. "Then I will," said the little red hen. And she baked 5 loaves of bread and held it up. Now, when they all saw the bread, they all wanted a part of the bread. In fact, they demanded that the bread should be shared. But the little red hen said, "No, I bake the bread. I work for it. I eat it myself." Then what did the neighbors do? "Excess profits," yelled the cow. "Capitalist leech," cried the duck. "I demand equal rights," shouted the pig. And the goose just screamed out. Then they hurriedly painted unfair picket signs and marched around shouting obscenities. Now, this is a very common thing that we've seen around happening in our country and in many other countries. I want to give you the message that we believe in equality, in social justice, but it is crony capitalism that we will not tolerate. There'll be zero tolerance, as my friend Iran said, as Harsha said. For entrepreneurship, we will support the local domestic entrepreneurs. For those who are working hard to be globally competitive, to build a domestic industry that's strong, that can face up to competition the world over. Like the little red hen, for those who are entrepreneurs, the opportunity, what the government can do for you is what we'll stand up for. Ladies and gentlemen, as I told you, you heard numbers, you saw strategy, and you saw what we are going to do, policy. I want to tell you why you should believe in Sajith Premadasa and not the other candidates. I want to tell you that there are other candidates. The country has to make a choice. This is about one of the most crucial elections in our country. It's going to make or break our country. One of the other candidates, Honorable Anurakumara Disanayaka, spoke about his policy. And his party swears by the socialist policy. His party swears by it, but his manifesto contradicts it. Where do they stand? Either they are fooling their cadre or they are fooling the public. That's a question that we need to ask. The key tagline that they've been talking about is the Hatta Hatare Sapaya. Hatta Hatara Vasare Sapaya. This has gone on and on. Is it the myth or is it the truth? You need to understand that. So I need to revisit the past to tell you, because this is for you to make up your minds. In 1948, our country got independence. In 1948, the last governor, the British governor, was Lord Salisbury. When Lord Salisbury was handing over our country, he did a report. And in that report, he says, in 1948, Sri Lanka's majority of the people lived in abject poverty. They lived in servitude. That was the society that our leaders inherited in 1948. I would like to show you the first slide here. In 1948, our literacy rate was something like 35%. 65% of our people couldn't read or write. By 1994, it came to 94%, near 100%, because of free education. That was the change. In 1948, our life expectancy was just 45 years. People died at 45, majority of them. Life expectancy went to 75 years because of free health. Then, in the next slide, you will see that food security. When we took over in 1948, there were only 6 million people. The population was just 6 million. And we produced only 36% of our rice production in this country. 66% was imported. But by 1994, we had a 15 million population, but we became self-sufficient in rice. That was how Sri Lanka moved on. So, is that the 74 years Hatta Hatare Sapaya? How did we change that? So in the next slide, I want to show you, there was a paradigm shift in 1977. Some people say the beginning of the end was in 1977. But the end of the beginning came much later. I'll tell you how that happened. But in 1977, we did a paradigm shift and we moved the country to an export-led economy. The next slide, please. So we had an export-led economy, right? At that time in Sri Lanka, in 77. And there we built up the free trade zone, the garment industry, foreign employment, and foreign direct investment. When you take the foreign direct investments during that period, I need to remind you that there was the leftist socialist movement that kept on intervening and obstructing any development and moving forward. At that time, when there was a road being built in 1967 in Vellavaya, a simple road, it was a long straight road for kilometers, one straight road. And the JVP and the leftists took up the position that this road was being built for USA, American planes to land on them. That was how ridiculous was the allegations that was made. In 1980s, there were Japanese companies like Toyota, Mazda, and Honda, along with other international investors who came in to set up factories in Sri Lanka. But the JVP protested, and they disrupted the economy at that time, and all these companies left Sri Lanka and went away, and they invested in Thailand and in Malaysia. And the automobile industry has grown in those countries. That was the opportunity that we missed. Calculate this and see. In the global value chain, when you look, the intermediary accessories production, the industrial production, including vehicles and vehicle spare parts, is one of the main components of exports in the world today. If you look at it as a percentage of total exports, because we lost that opportunity, Thailand exports 48% of their exports in intermediary products and accessories like that, and in the automobile industry. Malaysia exports 42%, and Sri Lanka still stands at 5%. So you can see the missed opportunities. One other glaring issue that I needed to show you is that Sri Lanka, the loss in education, what happened? Because the JVP's only consistency is their inconsistency. I saw their manifesto. In their manifesto, in the JVP manifesto, they talk about private education. And now they talk about regulating private education. But in the 1980s, there was a white paper on education, which was groundbreaking to bring up our skills to international standards. But the whole country was almost burnt down when that paper was brought. and they stopped the move. In 1980s, there was a move to bring a non-profit private medical college, a government-supported not-for-profit medical college. Dr. G.M. Heen Nilame was made the doctor in charge to set it up. J.R. Javardhana, the then president, set it up, and he opened it on the 21st of September in 1981, the Ragama Private Medical College. And the JVP started opposing it. In 1988, the JVP set fire to the administrative building. And by 1989, President Premadasa, under severe pressure, had to shut it down. But other people were watching this. Mahathir Mohamad looked at this. The moment he saw they were closing it down, he got his Minister of Education to talk to the faculty of all the professors who were in the medical college. And he took the whole lot over to Kuala Lumpur, set up the same university in Malaysia. Today it is the International Medical University. Today, every year, 125 Sri Lankan students go and study there. You can calculate the economic loss for our country. We could have set it up in our country. Friends, this was the loss we made at that time. However, the next slide, please. With all these challenges, Sri Lanka's position in 1994, as you can see, our exports as a percentage of GDP went up to 32%. Our government revenue as a percentage of GDP was 22%, which is by far any developed country has those figures. We were in par with the emerging tigers, and we were along with those countries. In 1980s, Deng Xiaoping, the then president of China, sent a delegation to Sri Lanka to look at our FTZ and to copy the model and to set it up in China. They did the exact copy. And today China is the economic powerhouse of the world. But because of the leftists blocking every move for Sri Lanka to expand, we got stuck in the mud. That is why we needed to change. Now, economists, next slide please. Economists in Sri Lanka refer to 2004 as the trigger point at where our crisis started. Why do they say this? Because in 2004, there was a JVP Rajapaksa alliance government formed. And what happened? Next slide, please. In 2001 to 2004, that period, there was a government which understood that we had to make some structural changes. We had to go for some massive reforms. And those proposals were made to reform the public sector, the CEB, the CPC, also restructure inland revenue, which we are still talking about, the customs and SOE reforms. That was in 2001, 2002. However, that was blocked by the JVP. They got together with the Rajapaksa government, toppled that government, started a hate campaign. They talked about various things and anti-market reforms, and then they stopped the whole process. As a result, next slide. As a result, what happened was the JVP Leftist Alliance government was formed. And between 2004 and 2015, if you take the SOEs, the losses of the SOEs came up to nearly 1 trillion. So you can imagine what happened. And also, if you take the public service, actually between 1994 and 2004, there was an attempt to reduce the number of people in the public service. It came down. But again, from 2004 to 2014, the number of people in the public service went up. These all are reasons why we have got into this position. We need to understand why and who is responsible for this. Next slide, please. Eventually, if you look at the result, what happened with the JVP Rajapaksa alliance, with the leftist alliance, when you look at our public debt figures, for 56 years, from 1948 to and up to 2004, that was 56 years, our public debt was rupees 1,996 billion. However, from 2004 to 2014, within 10 years, it goes up by 500% to 9,953 billion rupees. So it's scary when you look at those numbers. Our exports come down from 32% to 12%, and it drops even further. And our government revenue drops from 22% to 10%. Now it's even below that, even below that. So these, actually, if you look at it, you understand the Hatta Hatare Sapya, where it lies and who's responsible. This country could have made the change. We were one of the first in Asia to make the change to look at an export-led economy. We were the one to start the free market economy. But because of leftist protests and policies, Sri Lanka could never get ahead. All the countries in the region capitalized on that. The visionaries were in our country. It was just that they were not given the political chance to do it. And if you don't have a mindset change, we are going to be in the same place again. That is why we are telling you this election is crucial for all of us, because how we decide is very important. It's not with emotion, but it's how you think. Dear friends, I would like to say that that is why we are thinking about change. There's one more candidate, right, on the other side, Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe. His economic model is mostly neoliberal. He's talking about a neoliberal model. It pursues a policy of total deregulation of markets. As you know, this leads to numerous harmful socio-economic consequences, ending in poverty and deterioration of income distribution. Eventually, as you see the world over, it ends up in social unrest. I would like to take an example of the developing nations. If you take the UK, there's a lot of social unrest, a lot of things that have happened in the past couple of years, mainly because of these income disparities, because of unequal distribution. You take Western Europe, they are also thinking of making changes in the neoliberal thinking. Take the USA. One good example near home is Bangladesh. They had an 8% growth. With an 8% growth, they have huge social unrest, again because of income disparities and because of wealth distribution problems. I would like to take India as a good example. Prime Minister Modi set sights on 370 seats for his elections. He was sure he would get that majority. But the BJP government got only 250 seats. They couldn't even form a government on their own. They had to go into a coalition. But that was with India's big economic numbers, very strong numbers, 8.4% growth in the last quarter of 2023, world's fifth largest economy. But on a per capita basis, with all that, they are desperately poor. The per capita income is $2,400. Their inequality has grown. The richest 1% owns 40% of the wealth in the country. The poorest 50% own only 6% of the wealth. Staggering figures. A good illustration of that is, take Mumbai. Mumbai is their financial capital. There is no starker demonstration of disparity and discontent. This financial center, Mumbai, is home to both Mukesh Ambani, Asia's richest man, and it is also home to Dharavi, the world's third largest slum. So you can imagine what big capital does. It doesn't solve all your problems. Ladies and gentlemen, what does SJV stand for? My colleagues explained to you. They spoke about good governance. They spoke about inclusive growth. They spoke about the economic numbers, the policy, how we are going to get this done. Because we've seen this. We've seen the issues, we've studied it, and we think that Sri Lanka has to take the right decision. That's why our political ideology, next slide please. That's why our political ideology and our economic model rests very importantly. Whilst our political ideology is based on social democracy, our economic model is derived from it, which is the social market economy, which fosters equitable growth by harnessing the power of the markets whilst ensuring economic justice and social protection for all. This is very clearly stated in the blueprint. That is what we stand for. We are very clear with our policy. We are not like others who change. They say the same thing and contradict it in the next page. Everything we say, we stand for it. That's how important it is. Political and economic stability actually is a primary requirement for growth. Without political and economic stability, you can't do it. But political, economic, and stability is like having a 3-layer cake on your lap when you're traveling in a 3-wheeler on 3rd Cross Street at breakneck speed with a three-wheeler driver taking you through.
Sri Lanka Vamadirian Saracen.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are happy our president is here. I would call him our president. Because when we started, there was a perception that there were 3 front runners. Now there is only one front runner, and the others are just runners. So I'm so happy to continue with our president here. I'd like to tell you all, you experimented in 2019. That experiment failed miserably. We crashed. There are countries that have collapsed more than once for choosing the wrong government, the wrong leaders. We could collapse again if you make that wrong choice. That's how dangerous it is. That's how important this election is. In Sri Lanka, in the king's days, one of the greatest rulers, one of the greatest kings who ruled Sri Lanka was Mahaparakramabahu in the period of 1153 up to 1186. He was the first king, he was the first ruler in Sri Lanka to set up export processing zones in Dakshina Lanka. He set up the EPZ, export processing zones, and it was called Antaranga Durya. The Antaranga Durya had special officials to manage it. That's how far the king thought. The Antaranga Durya went so far that the king even sent ambassadors in the 12th century to Egypt and other countries to promote trade. And he prepared our exports for cinnamon, for gems, honey, ivory, and processed timber. See how far the king thought. That was one of the greatest periods of Sri Lanka's economic growth, that Mahaparakramabahu's regime. What I would like to tell you is, for what Honorable Harsha De Silva and Honorable Eran Wickramaratne presented, the blueprint, a model that is practical, that can move this country to another dimension. We have an opportunity with a president, with a leader such as Sajith Premadasa, an era beyond that of Mahaparakramabahu's reign, an era to capture the world market, an era of inclusive growth and shared prosperity. Sajith Premadasa for president. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, yet another very insightful presentation on the way forward, the vision for the future as we unfold to all of you present here this momentous evening. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we all put our hands together one more time to Honorable Kabir Hashim for that insightful presentation. Thank you very much. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it is, of course, as witnessed, we do have with us a very special guest joining in, and I would like to take this moment to welcome the Honorable Opposition Leader, of course, Sajith Premadasa, and the leader of the Samagi Jana Sandhya. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause. Let's all put our hands together and welcome him.
Dear Sri Lankans, we stand at a crossroads that will define our future and the future of our children. For 75 years, our votes have been driven by what divides us. The results of these divisions are all too evident. This time, let's choose a different path. Vote not just for your community, ethnicity, or business interests, but for the entire nation. Our country needs a vision rooted in strong foundations of education and good governance. We must reject anger and hate. They only destroy all of us. We must also reject empty promises from those responsible for Sri Lanka's deepest crisis. It's time we move forward as one people. I promise my victory will not be for a few, but for all. May we all win.
A vision for the future, a win for all, ladies and gentlemen. Why not we put our hands together one more time for this momentous moment, everybody. Thank you. With that, we move on to one of the most awaited, and that is when it is time for us to unveil and reveal to you SJP's Blueprint 3.0. To do the honors, very humbly and respectfully, I would like to invite Honorable Sajith Premadasa, the opposition leader and the leader of the Samagi Jana Sandhana on stage to do the honors of the unveiling this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Alongside, I would also like to very humbly and respectfully invite Dr. Harsha De Silva, Honorable Iran Vikramratna, alongside Honorable Kabir Hashim on stage as well. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all put our hands together to this momentous moment.
Mage rata bala gamwannata sarasen diyunuwa yali kendannata sarasen samagiya bala gamwaniti sarasen Sri Lanka.
The blueprint, ladies and gentlemen, a win for all, is about and all set to be unveiled this evening. As the tab is being presented, and we are ready to witness the unveiling, and also inviting all our dear guests to scan the QR and take a glimpse of the Blueprint 3.0. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all put our hands together as you are receiving a first-hand experience of the Blueprint 3.0. Once again, we'd like to request the audience, you could scan the QR code which is visible on the screen and take a glimpse of this momentous blueprint. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to hear from a very special person, the leader of the Samagi Jana Sandhana, the largest and most diverse political alliance in the history of Sri Lanka. He served as the Deputy Minister of Health from the year 2001 to 2004 and the Minister of Housing from 2015 to 2019. He's a graduate of the London School of Economics and Political Science of the University of London. His degree has covered the areas of economics, politics, and international relations. Also has had the rare distinction of interning in the US Senate working in its Foreign Relations Committee under Senator Larry Pressler from South Dakota, ladies and gentlemen. A veteran politician with 30 years of public service. Please put your hands together to Honorable Sajith Premadasa as he addresses this momentous evening.
Colleagues and members of Parliament,
distinguished members of the Samagi Jana Balavega Economic Policy Committee, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for being here today. We are all in the midst of an extremely critical time period, a turning point that presents immense challenges as well as incredible opportunities. But before we dive into that, I want to remind you of something. Throughout history, countries have faced the harsh realities of bankruptcy. They didn't just survive, they came back stronger. They used their crises as a springboard for change. And I believe with all my heart that Sri Lanka can do the same. I'm proud of the plan we presented, and I'm even more prouder of the capacity of the SJB team in executing this plan. It's not that Sri Lanka hasn't had its share of good ideas and plans. Over the years, we have seen plenty of plans that had the potential to elevate our nation. But let's be honest, lack of progress isn't due to a shortage of ideas. It is due to the lack of execution. Often, politics have stood in the way. Too often, political interests have clashed with what's best for the people. And that has been our biggest roadblock. Time and again, political opportunism has taken precedence over national interest. The cycle of broken promises and unfulfilled potential is why we have been stuck. Not because we lacked vision, but because that vision was often sacrificed for short-term political gain. The cost of this is not measured in just economic terms. It's the opportunities that we have lost, the talent that has left our shores, and the hope that's faded in our people. So it is extremely important to consider your vote in this particular context. Pay as much attention to the team as you pay to the plan. To break this cycle, we cannot afford shallow thinking. We need to really consider what it takes to create real change. And by that, I mean growth for Sri Lanka. Political factions and political identities created through branding exercises are only driven by self-interest and hype. They cannot provide the kind of change that we need. We need a clear, unified mandate, not one that's constantly compromising and adapting at the expense of countries' development. We must commence with comprehensive constitutional change. The challenges we face are complex, deeply rooted, fundamental, and they require urgent structural reforms. Real change demands the collective will of a strong majority in Parliament. There are no shortcuts. It's within this democratic framework that we can build a solid foundation, not just to address our current crises, but to safeguard the future generations to come. SJB is the only team with a clear plan. A strong team that possesses the political will to deliver the necessary reforms. And that is why today isn't just about presenting a political program. It's also showing you the blueprint for how we'll make these goals a reality. We stand firm in our integrity, and we urge you, especially in the business community, to think rationally. Look at the history of politics in Sri Lanka. A team that follows a leader only driven by self-interest and extreme selfishness will never have the political will to execute the constitutional reforms and the economic reforms needed to kickstart growth. It is why they cannot imagine anything beyond a measly 3% growth in the future. And we also have a team that promises system change without parliamentary strength to back it up. And they will not be able to deliver. Because we are all aware of the manner in which consistently, persistently, they have obstructed the much needed fundamental reforms which would have catapulted Sri Lanka into a country that would have achieved new industrialized status. So, they will eat their empty words. As such, it is imperative for us to understand the next steps of change and educate ourselves on what it takes so that we are better informed. We simply don't have the luxury of time. Time is not on our side, and we cannot experiment. This is a time to embark on a time-tested vision backed up by a superlative team that will make sure that we walk the talk. It is important that we have patience and also embrace the discomfort that comes with change. We will stand firm in our commitment to the constitutional and economic reforms that will transform our nation. Nothing can stop our growth except our own wishful thinking. It's time for all of us to step out of our comfort zone and consider the bigger picture. Our national security, our prosperity, our future, all of it hinges on economic security for everyone. It hinges on future stability. We promise you continuity and recovery along with change. Continue the excellent standards that we have achieved in certain sectors, but also embark upon path-breaking changes that are crucial if our country is to extricate itself from this present situation of despair. We promise to create robust engines of growth. We promise serious structural reforms, and we will ensure inclusive growth and shared prosperity. Anyone can make promises, but SJB possesses the only team that can deliver on this promise. So I urge all of you to go through the substance, the prescriptions provided in the blueprint, a blueprint that will take Sri Lanka towards prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sajith Premadasa. I would like to request you, sir, to join with us on stage once again as we move on to a very awaited moment. This is the panel discussion and Q&A session. And to join on the panel alongside Honorable Sajith Premadasa, I would like to invite Dr. Harsha De Silva, Honorable Iran Vikramratne, alongside Honorable Kabir Hashim as well, to join with us on stage. To do the moderating, ladies and gentlemen, we do have an individual, a first-generation entrepreneur and a seasoned professional in logistics and supply chain management with over 35 years of experience. He's an alumnus of Harvard Business School, where he completed the Owner-President Management Program, and is an accomplished Toastmaster. Ladies and gentlemen, our moderator this evening, Mr. Niral Kadavarache, everybody. As we set up for the panel discussion, a very awaited moment on the Q&A as well, we'd like to once again remind that you could download the Blueprint 3.0, ladies and gentlemen, by scanning the QR code.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think you have been waiting for a long time, listening to lengthy description presentations. The speakers, in their enthusiasm to deliver what they have in mind, what they are promising the people, I think went a little over time. I hope all of you are okay. And we were waiting until the Honorable Sajith Premadasa comes, and he was able to catch up with the time. Thank you very much for doing that. So these questions that I have are all from the audience. So there are about 9-10 questions. I have about 20-30 minutes to complete the Q&A session. So I am going to dive into the Q&A straight away. The first question is to Honorable Sajith Premadasa. This question was asked by Anishka De Silva from the audience. What actions will the SJB take to cut public expenditure? increasing the taxes alone cannot be the only solution. Over to you, sir.
So we will take a very careful look at our expenditure programs. We will be very, very surgical in our approach in allocating resources to the priority items of the national development agenda. We will make all attempts to cut down waste and unnecessary expenditures, and the policymakers and the decision makers will act as role models in terms of utilizing the very scarce resources that we have, and we will ensure those resources are allocated for national, economic, social, educational, health, and other priorities. We will also make sure that there will be adequate accountability and responsibility in expending the finite resources that we possess. It is very important that as temporary trustees, that we are very particular about the manner in which we use and utilize the taxpayers' funds. So we will, on the one hand, strive to eradicate waste, mismanagement, duplication, and also direct the resources to ensure that we achieve our national objectives, and also, on the other hand, be accountable, responsible, and transparent in allocating funds, in implementing programs, and we will also have a very strong evaluation and monitoring mechanism to ensure that objectives are reached within a specified time span. So that's the way we will strive to ensure that government expenditure is controlled and managed in a manner that it contributes to the nation's prosperity.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next question is Honorable Harsha De Silva. The question is from Amira in the audience. This is a bit of a long question. I'll read that out to you. The youth aspire to be able to afford a vehicle, afford a housing lease, and afford a reasonable living. Our neighbor, India, has been able to make the economy bearable, whilst Lankans are pushed against the wall and left to leave the country seeking a better future. What practical methods will you take to make the wishes of the youth attainable, and how soon will it be?
Thank you. I mean, that's the real issue, right? It's about our youth. It's about our kids. That's what I said. You know, we hope to be able to, hope our kids will be able to inherit something that they would love to live in, not to leave. So our whole effort, Niral, would be to try and help these people feel that we are on the right track. Things are not going to change overnight, right? I mean, today people see what others enjoy, TikTok, Instagram. You know, these see not just here in India, but across the world. These are not things that, you know, are unachievable. But it somehow seems so far away in this country. I mean, young people, when they get married, would love to have a place of their own. But how many young people are able to buy an apartment, build a house? You know, it's beyond the reach of young people. You know, nothing for less than 20, 30 million rupees. right? And go out in the periphery. Affording a house is impossible. What do they want, like you said, to buy a car, small car? These are not unreasonable things. But if you can create wealth, if you can create opportunities so that these young people can be employed, that provide them with a decent salary at the end of the month, or provide opportunities for entrepreneurship, I guess then they'll feel like, look, my dreams may come true. They want to work hard, like Kabir's example. You can't just wait, do nothing, and demand, diyao, mata diyao. It's politically appealing. We are citizens of this country. Everybody will need to be given something. That's not how the world works. So we got to create opportunities. I think what we will do is to create those opportunities for young people to work hard and then enjoy the fruits of their hard work. Like Lee Kuan Yew, I think, said, unless you work hard, you will not achieve anything.
Thank you, Harsha. The next question is to Honorable Iran Vikramaratne. The question is from Mohammed Dilshan in the audience. What will you do to change the corrupt system and also to create a healthy economy, not taxing the few individual taxpayers? I think it should be taxpayers, basically. What will you do to change the corrupt system and also create a healthy economy, not taxing the taxpayers?
On the corruption issue, I think it's a question of trust. I talked about the Independent Public Prosecutor's Office, and I think it's a question of actually it working, because if it works and one of us is put behind bars, I'm telling you it will sort the problem. It's a question of trust. On the taxpayers issue, I don't know exactly what the questioner was really after.
I think he was asking that in the tax net, the numbers are small, and instead of taxing the who are in the net already.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm complete agreement. The tax net has to be widened. We had that exercise in 2017-18. Didn't become very popular doing it, but we almost double the number of taxpayers in the country. Everybody needs to take responsibility, and we have a social responsibility to actually pay the taxes. So I'm talking here as a professional rather than as a politician. We all have to make our contribution. So many people were outside the net. We were able to get them to come into the net, whether they were professionals, because that's the only way that you can create some social stability. And I agree, the burden has to be borne by everybody, not just heaping the burden on those who are already paying.
Thank you. I think they're also looking for value for money. Whatever they want to pay taxes, they want something back in return to the public. Perhaps that's the back of his mind too. The next question is to Honorable Kabir Hashim. The question is from Manjula Pereira. I think this was answered, but I think maybe you can give a quick answer, Honorable Hashim. What areas, sections of the IMS agreement will be renegotiated under SJB administration?
I think Harsha spoke about it, in fact. The IMF have already clearly stated to them that we are looking to make some amendments within the framework. We want to stick to the key targets. So the framework within, you can always change certain things within it. The revenue to GDP target of 15.4% in 2028 is something we will stand by. The debt to GDP target of 95%, also the 2.3 primary surplus, those will not be changed. But we've consistently said that how we differ is how we get to those targets. So, for example, the burden on the people in terms of the pay tax is huge. And we talked about the personal income tax. We want to amend the slabs from 1% to 24%. And for those under 500,000, that will give relief to a lot of people who are in the pay tax net. And for those over earning above a certain amount, 36% will still apply. So there won't be huge losses of revenue because compliance will become greater when you make it easier on the people. You spread the tax net as we were talking. And also the imputed, also talking about the imputed rental tax on your household, the house that you're living in. We are not in agreement with that. We want to make an amendment because it's not fair, it's not practical. Also capital gains tax. You know, already in the market, there is a tax on the transaction at source. So having another additional capital gains tax is not it is going to be a problem because we need to incentivize the capital markets. Our capital markets are going to play a huge role because of the capex of 2%. Large infrastructure projects will have to be funded by public-private participation and from the equities market. So unless we support this, it won't be practical. So we've looked at these changes within the framework, and it won't affect the agreement with IMF. I'm sure they will be able to accommodate our requests.
Understood, very clear. I think this will be the last question. It is to Honorable Sajith Premadasa. How are you going to tackle SOE reforms?
State-owned enterprises can no more be a burden to the country, the economy, the taxpayer and the people. We have to make sure that SOEs become sustainable resources to the country. So SOE reforms is integral to the transformative economic policies that we hope to implement. We believe that SOEs have to be looked at individually. Those who are presently making profits, we need to ensure that we have methodologies to enhance the profits. Those who are loss-making, we would look at models that exist in Singapore, the Temasek model, or the Khazanah model, as you have in Malaysia, whereby the SOE reforms will be specific and targeted and ensure that they don't become a burden on the country. In the same context, I would like to say that certain SOEs perform important functions which are directly correlated to national security issues. So we will look at those aspects. For example, energy security is something that we have to look at. We have to make sure that those security interests are also taken into consideration when we look at far-reaching reforms. We would like to ensure that services that are rendered and delivered by the SOEs should be of high quality and standard. And that can only be achieved by bringing in new actors, new private partners into the competitive process. So that a competitive process will ensure that there is delivery of high quality and high standard services to the customer and the consumer. So that's the approach that we will take as far as SOE reforms are concerned, and that's an issue that we will address in a forthright manner, because these are issues that cannot be avoided. It cannot be shelved. These are issues that we have to discuss. We have to be transparent and open about it. And our primary goal is to make sure that SOEs are not a burden on the country and the economy, and that SOEs provide an efficient service to the people of Sri Lanka.
Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think that's the end of our Q&A session. On behalf of the organizing team, I would like to thank all you in the audience in large numbers. We had a packed house today. Thank you so much and have a pleasant evening.
Jaya